This episode, I'm actually going to share one of the recent presentations I gave at the Collective Genius. The Collective Genius is one of the masterminds we're in, and I think it's literally one of the best operator-based masterminds that you could possibly be in for real estate professionals. It has a ton of high-level fix and flippers, wholesalers, developers in it. Every other meeting, you're supposed to give up and give a presentation. I've been in this a ton of times, and so I've given a bunch of presentations, and typically you're voted on by your peers on who has the best presentation, and then you win a belt and you hold that belt until the next meeting, which is really cool. I've won a couple of these belts because I guess I've given good presentations and given a good amount of value, but on this one, I decided that I wanted to speak from the heart. I wanted to speak to something that holds true to who we are, who I am, my wife and I are, to the values that we hold, and then even to what we've been going through in our life. And so I talk about foster care, our journey in foster care and adoption. I talk about the need that there is in foster care because many people don't know this, but this is actually a national crisis. This is not something that is just, oh man, there's something going on in the world. This is a systemic issue that's a national crisis. And so this episode is not going to be real estate based, but it's going to be the entree part of this podcast. This is an entree real estate podcast, which means the entrepreneurial journey as well as the real estate journey. Foster care is a big part of that. That also plays into our BHAG and the impact we want to make into the world. So you're going to hear a lot about that in this presentation. You're going to hear my heart, and you're going to hear me get raw and real and what my desires are and my goals and my vision for the company and my life and where I want to take this. Evidently, a lot of people were impacted by this because it won a belt, which is cool. And so my hope is that you're impacted as well. And if it is impactful for you, please reach out. Let me know. Send me an email, send me a text, send me a DM, post about it, whatever. Share it if you think this would be helpful for somebody. Heck, you might even want to share this with your spouse because you've been thinking about foster care, and this could be a good resource for you. So thankful for you. I hope you enjoyed this episode, as it is something a little bit different, but something that's close to my heart and close to who we are. And so, of course, I want to share it. So here we go. Enjoy. I'd love to hear your feedback. Thanks so much. I hope you have a fantastic, fantastic day. I was going to talk about some of the stuff in here. I was going to share a little about who I am, but I have 3 belt-winning options that I thought about that I could talk about today that I thought would be really fantastic. We started and we run a fund, so I could talk about raising $1 million in 90 days through social media, because we've been able to do that over kind of a 90-day period, which has been really awesome. We could talk about the installment method, which will absolutely change all of your businesses because it is. So I got a phone call one day, and it was Steve Trang. And you get a phone call from Steve Trang, and you're like, yo, Steve Trang, why are you calling me? Like, okay, what's up, man? And so he called me, and he was like, hey, Devin, I think I accidentally did the installment method. And I was like, okay, explain to me what you did. And he did it, and he goes, this is the best thing. Like, this is going to be the future of wholesaling, of real estate investing, and I think it's incredible. So I could talk about that. I would love to talk about that if you want to a little bit later. Or AI. I love AI. I gave a talk on AI at the last event. And I could talk about all those things, but the thing that I really want to talk about is this. So this is my family. This was last month, and you can see there's a difference. Can anybody notice the difference between the 2 photos? So one has a sticker on her face, and then this month she doesn't, because we just signed the adoption paperwork to adopt our daughter last week. And so my wife and I have spent the last 4 years fostering and adopting children, and it's been one of the greatest things I could ever do with my life. It's been the biggest labor of love I could ever imagine. It's been the hardest thing I can imagine, but it's also been one of the greatest things that I could possibly imagine. And you would think that I've won the foster care lottery because these kids are freaking adorable. I mean, like, these kids are absolutely incredible, but it hasn't always been like that because we've had 5 kids come through our home, not just these ones. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that process because it's hard. Parenting is hard in general, and a lot of us know that. Foster care is hard. You're dealing with trauma, you're dealing with court, you're dealing with substance abuse, and you're dealing with all sorts of stuff. And I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about the story on how we got to where we are and why we foster children. So my wife was diagnosed with something called Fragile X. I don't know if anybody knows about this. There's a whole bunch of fertility issues that people have nowadays, and it's real, and it's hard. And so you try to come up with things like in vitro fertilization or what you should do to could potentially grow your family. And so we explored a lot of those options. So Fragile X, what it is it's a deformity in the X chromosome where there is if you have a boy, there's a 100% chance that your boy will have some sort of mental or physical deformation.
If you have a girl, there's a 60% chance that she will have one. So it's one thing to have a child, and then they have some sort of mental or physical deformation, and you go like, this is kind of what we've been given in life, and we're gonna love this child, and we're gonna give it everything we have. It's another thing to know that you could knowingly bring in a child that would suffer in this way. So my wife and I decided that we weren't going to do that. And so we went to a bunch of different agencies because we said, okay, what would it look like to adopt? And I don't know if anybody in here has ever explored adoption, but it is expensive. Does anybody know how much on average it costs to adopt a child in the United States?
40K.
Yeah, 40K. So 30 or 40K. So depending on the agency you go through, that's the average it costs to adopt a child in the United States. It's extremely expensive. And so as my wife and I sat in these meetings of these different services to decide on if we wanted to, like not if we wanted to adopt, how we were going to adopt, we continued to hear about foster care and the need that there is in the United States for foster care. There are 800 children in Charlotte, North Carolina alone, 800 children with unsafe homes, 11,000 in North Carolina as a whole. There are 23% of families that were licensed in 2021 didn't license again in 2023. So that means that out of 381 foster children in America, there are only 205 families that could be able to take care of these children. And this crushed us. There are kids that are literally sleeping on the floor in Charlotte inside of the foster homes because they got nowhere to go. They get taken in the middle of the night, get taken out of their home because substance abuse, because domestic violence, because of crime, because of malnourishment. That's how we got some of our kids, because of all different sorts of things. They get taken out of this home and they're away from their teddy that they sleep with every night, their blanket, and they're thrown into the floor of an office of somebody because they don't have anywhere to go. And so this crushed me and my wife. And so we decided to do something about it. We didn't know what to do. We didn't know how to do it. And we went through a course that is completely, doesn't do nothing to train you to foster kids with high trauma or to help people. It just says, hey, these are the regulations to it all, and you got to make sure that you have this many beds and you do this. It doesn't help you how to raise kids. Like our first foster kid, they came to us and they said, he's a great kid. He's such a great kid, and he is. He's probably one of the sweetest kids I've ever met. We were in 6 foster home in 3 years. Okay, so he had been in 6 foster homes. His dad was a murdering child molester. Okay, so like this is what we had inherited, was this child who had been physically harmed, who had been abused, who hadn't been loved by a male in his life, who hadn't seen what it looked like for a woman or a man to love a wife, who hadn't been raised in a home that actually cared about him. And that's what we got for our first foster placement, and he was extremely high trauma. And one thing about trauma, and I think we hear the word trauma, and we think like, oh, there's been a huge accident, someone's gonna have a traumatic experience from it, which like that's a legitimate thing. What trauma does though, it takes our fight or flight system, our fight or flight response, and it elevates that to a higher level. For him, he didn't lie because he wanted to get out of trouble. He lied because his brain has conditioned him to say, if I don't lie, I will die. I will literally die. A lot of you guys probably have this issue, right? Like your kids don't want to get ready in the morning. Like never wanted to get his shoes on in the morning, and we had the hardest time. And until I understood how trauma affected his brain and how to react to that, I would, get your shoes on, let's go, come on. But one thing about him, he went to school one day, and when he got out of school, the social worker picked him up and said, you're living with somebody else today. And his stuff was at our house. Every morning when he got up, he thought, I'm never coming back to this house again. And so that's what we had to deal with. And so this is on our last night where we had him because he became extremely explosive whenever he was alone with my wife. Violent, very violent. He would almost attack our children, like our other 2 children. He would almost attack her. He would get in her face. And so he couldn't stay. So my wife would have what's called secondhand trauma. Like whenever I even thought of leaving to go to dinner with somebody, she would have panic attacks. She would just stress. She would go into like states of shock. Like she couldn't be alone with him because of this. And so unfortunately he had to go, but like this was one of the hardest nights of his life because I was the only guy he had ever connected with in his life. The only guy that ever actually loved him. The only guy who had ever showed him what it looked like to live in a really good family. And so he went to live with this family who was his teacher at the time, which is cool. So he left us to go live with his teacher. And then a couple months later, he got himself kicked out of that family. And then he went on to live with somebody else. Who's now adopted Vi, and I'm thankful for that. Oh, and so this is where I learned all about trauma and the impact of trauma has and the way that you could be able to relate to people that have trauma and how you can understand what they're going through in their life because trauma will absolutely rewire your mind. And so the normal tactics of discipline or whatever just don't work. They just don't. And so we had to deal with him. Like, we just had to learn what that looks like. And we have to do that with our children now, because I'll talk about my kids too. But before I talk about them, I want to talk about August. August is actually my children's biological baby brother. Our kids, those are the two, they were two when they were younger. Actually, my daughter over there, her name is Amaya. When she came to us at 10 months old, she would hoard food in her mouth for hours because her body had learned to protect her because it didn't know when she was going to be fed again. So like we would eat dinner, give her a bath, we would play, and when I'd put her in her crib, I'd have to take food out of her mouth so she didn't choke on it at night. And so then we have, that's my daughter. She's amazing. And then Ashton. Ashton's a giant. He's now 6 and he's 4'4". He's huge and he's like 65 pounds. He's he's huge. He's gonna be like Uncle Darius. And so, big guy. So we had prepared, we had known, we already had 2 of the siblings. Mom's pregnant again. Of course, like, yes, of course. We're going to take, yes, not even a question. So we were prepared. Before, and how this went was we got Keegan. So they're like, hey, this weekend, can you take this boy? Of course. And then about 2 months later, they were like, we got 2 more. Can you take them this weekend? Of course. So within 2 months, we went from 0 to 3 kids. But then with August, they're like, Mom's pregnant. Of course, you guys can take them. So we prepared. We created a nursery. We were excited. We couldn't do that before. And we even got the baby. And then in North Carolina, family has about 7 days to be able to say if they want to. We talked to Grandma. Grandma was like, nope, y'all have them. And about 2 days in, Grandma decided that she wanted August. And so then August had to go. And so this bond that we had created between your brother's going to live with us, it's going to be amazing, it's going to be so awesome, this bond that we had prepared for was gone in a day. There are so many things that go through foster care that people just don't understand, from family trauma, but also like, and I put these statistics, I probably should have put them in a little bit earlier, but the effects that it has on the children, like 80% of prisoners spent time in foster care. 80% of all of the prisoners in America spent time in foster care. Another one, youth placed in group homes are 2.5 more likely to get involved in the justice system. 90% of youth with 5 or more foster placements will enter into the justice system. Does anybody remember how many times Keegan, how many foster homes he's been in? 6. There's a 90% chance Keegan is going to be incarcerated. And that's hard because there's nothing I can do about that. I'll never talk to that kid again unless he finds me somehow in some way. Foster children in the U.S., there's 400,000 of them. Girls in foster care are pregnant by 19, 50% of them. That's not 200,000 because there's less women or girls in there, but former foster kids in U.S. prisons, 74% or 80, just depending on the sources, incarcerated within 2 years of aging out, which is 17, 50% of them within aging out of the system. Former foster youth on death row, 80%. 80% of the prisoners on death row were in foster care at some point in time. And so I don't say all this stuff to be like, oh my gosh, guys, like, go out there and do something. Like, you're a great hope. Like, no, like, I'm not telling you to go foster a bunch of kids or do anything like that, but there are ways you guys can help. Mentoring teens is one of them. Youth that people mentor are 55% less likely than their peers to skip school, 46% less likely than peers to start using illegal drugs, 27% less likely to start drinking, 81% more likely to participate in extracurricular activities, and 130% more likely to hold leadership positions, just because people decided to do something and to invest into these children that literally have no other hope. And so this is why you see in a lot of times gangs Gangs target kids in foster homes because they have nobody else investing in them. So most gang members were probably in the foster care system or didn't have a father figure in their life investing in them. There's so much opportunity here. Respite care is amazing. It's an ability to be able to take the kids for a week or a weekend and be able to watch them while the parents get some sort of rest. Because we deal with so much, from going to court to going to visits, like DSS visits, and my kids used to have to go visit their parents and all different types of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that we have to do with that. Keegan went to 3 different therapists that we used to have to go to while seeing his grandmother every other week, and going to court on a completely broken court system that completely failed him. And so there's so many ways that you can help. Sponsoring a social worker, there's a lot of people that you can go and just encourage, honestly. Encourage them. You can't give like monetary gifts, but you can go and you can encourage them, help them, sponsor them in some way. Partnering with local agencies to create supplies. Giving financially to nonprofits, and then also fostering children. Because guys, like, you have the ability to transform your kids' lives. It's amazing the way that you can affect people. My kids now, I'll stand in front of a house and my kids would be like, "Daddy, are you buying that house? Is that your house, Daddy?" And it's completely transformed any kind of reality that they once lived in. Now they know, they have no limiting beliefs on what's possible. My kids come to me with the courthouse. They come to me to buy properties at the courthouse. And it's the most awesome thing that I get to do this with them. But what's also really cool is one of the things we've been able to do is we keep a really good relationship with their family. So this is actually their family. On the left side is their big sister. In the middle, her and her grandmother, they came with us to Disney World to celebrate the adoption. On the right side there's my sister, my daughter on the left, August, who lived with us right there in the middle, in the blue, their sister, 6-year-old sister, my son, and then my baby girl, and then their 2 cousins. And we spent a lot of time with their family because a lot of times, and as a Christian, like, a lot of times people will be like, "Man, what a picture of the gospel," right? Like, what a picture of bringing together something that isn't the greatest and making a great situation out of it. But sometimes this reconciliation is a much better picture of that. Right, like that we get to reconcile what was going on with their family and bring them all back together again. That's a much better picture of the beauty of what's possible in foster care. And so one of the really good things about this is this allows you to be bigger than yourself and your business. This is our PPM for our 506B. In here, we have a charitable and contributions and community involvement clause that states that we will actively give back to foster care, the foster care system, and get involved into it. And a lot of our investors love that. They love being a part of something bigger than themselves. One thing that we're going to do, which is really, really cool, and don't take this idea, you bunch of bums. One of the things that's really, really cool is this idea called foster flips, where what we're going to do is we're going to work with the local agencies to help with families that are about to adopt their children. And I think it would be really cool. We're still like ironing this out, but like it'd be really cool. Like when they go to the adoption, send them off to like Disney World, and then when they get back, they come back to a room that's been flipped for them. Like really cool space that they get to come back and it's their permanent home now. And it's decorated for them and it's got really cool things in there. And that's a really cool way to give back, and something that our investors are really excited to get behind, that then they're now involved in investing in something that's way bigger than themselves as well. So they're a part of that. So I wanted to talk about that, not to bring it down a little bit or not to put any extra kind of weight, but to say that there's a huge need and there's way more ways to get involved than just fostering children. You can help a lot of people. Now, I got a lot of gives because if you know anything about me, I love to give. Has nothing to do with foster care, but I really wanted to share that because at the end of the day, that's what I'm passionate about. That's why I do what I do. That's the impact I want to make. Our BHAG for our fund is transform the lives of 10,000 families by building 1,000 units of affordable housing in 10 different cities around America. To transform Section 8 and to transform foster care in any way we possibly can. So my gives though, I wanted to give again this huge AI sheet. Don't take it, I got a thing at the end. This is a huge AI, my list of all my favorite AIs that you can use and how beneficial it could be to you or just how cool it is in general. This right here is a content calendar that's gonna be really cool where you can categorize it, do it by importance, do it by the type of your do it by whatever the type of episode or content format it's in. This can really help you guys to kind of like map it out. I have a really cool onboarding checklist. This actually is a little bit, I think on the left side, something that like Brewer did, so I took a little bit of that, but then I also added in a very like day 1, day 2. So this is like our onboarding for our acquisitions team, which is kind of cool. This is like, the next one is like one of my favorites. This is a beast of a renovation estimator that like really like, this is a monster. If you guys like want to dive into this, here is a foreclosure, because we specialize in foreclosures, a foreclosure checklist for your TC. So if you guys are doing a foreclosure, you rock this out and you can kind of go through this checklist. That could be really helpful. The next thing is about the installment method. I want to be helpful for you guys. I think the installment method will absolutely change your business just because of the nature of it, and I'm happy to talk about that at a very high level because I love it. If you click this, there's a YouTube video on there, but I also, if you DM me, I will walk you through your first installment method and do it with you. And I'll train your title company on how to do it, and we'll do all of that stuff, and then you can have the course after. So like, it's really, really cool. It's not my course, but I partner with them, and I'd love to do that with you. I also own a virtual assistant staffing company where we do, on one side, we have cold callers, texters, admin, executive assistant, closers, and all that stuff. And on the other side, we have content creation, marketing, so like podcast editing, YouTube editing. They do all my content, my VAs do. And so I'll give you 50% off that for your first 2 months with us if you want to do that. So scan this code right here to get all of those freebies, because there's a lot of them. Any questions? Sorry, I went like super deep and then super like opposite. Yeah, homie, what's up, Jason? Let's pass him the rock.
It is okay with you, neighbor. Whenever you get the Foster flipping going, I would love to fund the first bedroom.
Oh, man, that would be incredible. Thanks, man.
Cool.
Yeah, that means a ton. Thank you, bro. Freaking love you.
Back here.
I love this.
Hello.
I just wanted to thank you. My wife is the product of, she's the foster system, and she's the most beautiful person I've ever met, married 17 years, so thank you.
Yeah, man, it's cool. It's awesome. Thankful for her parents, man. If it went well, thank you for her parents.
Anyone else? How about a round of applause for one of the best humans I know?